Hello everybody. So as you know, I am making my way through the Arrowverse, or at least just Arrow and Flash. I've already talked about Arrow Season 4, which you can watch by clicking there, and today I'm going to be talking about Flash Season 2 and Legends of Today, Legends of Yesterday crossover between Arrow and Flash. Let's go. So, first, I'm going to talk about the crossover between Arrow Season 4 and Flash Season 2 in the episodes titled Legends of Today and Legends of Yesterday. So, I definitely think that this crossover shows that they're taking the crossovers to, the next level. The last crossover between Flash and Arrow in last seasons, it was very much just to have a crossover. There wasn't that big of a story going on through it. It was just kind of, we're going to have a Flash episode with the crossover, then we're going to have an Arrow episode with the crossover. But it wasn't like there was this big thing that you really needed Arrow and Flash together for. It was just kind of, let's do a crossover. We'll see how it works. But this one, it was much bigger scope, much bigger stakes, and I think that it just shows that they're taking the crossovers to the next level. They introduced Hawkman and Hawkgirl in it, kind of setting up, I think, DC's Legends of Tomorrow. I haven't watched that. I don't think I'm going to watch that, but, they're kind of setting that up here. I like that they incorporated Barry time traveling in here. They did the whole, ghosting thing, just kind of, I like that kind of format for when they're doing time travel here, kind of setting it up when you see the two Flashes running next to each other, and then, they kind of pay it off later when he time travels and it happens again, the kind of loop kind of thing. So I very much enjoy that they incorporated that here, of having them lose, and then Barry goes back in time, and then he tells them, how to win, and they win. I like that they did that. They also have Oliver find out about his son. That's the payoff from Season 2 when, Moira, gave the girl, it was $1 million or something to, go away, tell Oliver that she lost the baby, and, that whole flashback in that episode where Moira died. I like that they kind of pay that off here a little bit, with having Oliver find out about his son, and that's also kind of a bit of a big part of Season 4, of Arrow, so I like that they had that happen here. I do find it weird that they had the Flash episode take place primarily in Star City, and then they had the Arrow episode take place primarily in Central City. I thought that was an interesting choice there, but I thought it was cool. I like that they kind of, did the switch up with it, where you would think that the Flash episode would be in Central City and the Arrow would be in Star City, but they kind of flipped it. And yeah, overall, I think this was a very successful crossover. It bumped up the stakes, had some important things for each of the seasons of, Arrow Season 4 and Flash Season 2 in it. And yeah, again, it took crossovers to the next level, bigger scope, bigger scale. I very much enjoyed it. But now, let's get into Flash Season 2. So, last season, Season 1 ended, the Singularity forms, and Barry has to, runs up into it to try to stop it. And that's where it ends, on a big cliffhanger. And then, I don't feel like the first episode of Season 2 paid that off well enough. I feel like, having it in flashbacks just kind of, it's kind of annoying. I feel like I wish they had it as the first opening thing of the episode, and then they dealt with the consequences of it throughout the rest of it, instead of doing the flashbacks where it's like, oh, Flash saved the city, and then you find out throughout it that, Ronnie actually saved the city, or, Firestorm, Ronnie Stein, they saved the city, and the Flash kind of, wasn't able to do it. So I wish that they just showed that in its entirety at the beginning of the episode. I think that would have worked much better than doing it in flashbacks and have it just disjointed, and I feel like it just made it a bit anticlimactic. but they made up for it with the rest of the season being amazing. I just feel like they kind of like wrote themselves into a corner with the whole cliffhanger thing, and they were like, where do we go from here? Like, we set up this cool thing, but we don't really know where we're going with it, so let's just have it in flashbacks, and we'll, we'll give an explanation for it, in flashbacks in the episode, and I don't think it worked all that well. I like the thing where they have Wells, Ebert Thawne, have the recording where he admits to killing Barry's mother, and that allows Barry's father to get let out of prison. So, I like that they had that there. I thought that was a good kind of, way to kind of finish off season 1. The story a bit, kind of wrap up some of the stuff that they needed to. And for some reason, they have Barry's father decide, I'm not going to stay in Central City and, spend time with my son that I haven't seen in, 15 years? No, I'm just going to go away, live in like a cabin in the woods somewhere. That's a good idea. Like, that kind of just seems like a weird decision. I think it seems more of just like outside, real world factors of just, probably just didn't want to have the actor have to return every episode. I don't know if the actor was like doing some other show or movie or something during that time, but I think it's more of like real world factors than actually making sense in the story. They give an explanation like, I feel like I'm gonna get in the way of you being the Flash, so I have to leave. Like, that just seems weird. I think probably just like, outside real world, production factors than actually like, inside the world of the show. So moving on to kind of what this season really is about, deals a lot with alternate dimensions, alternate Earths. I like that they went that route. I think that's a nice progression from last season where it dealt a lot with time travel. I think it's interesting that they, it's a nice progression to have them now go from time travel to alternate universes, alternate dimensions, alternate Earths. I think that was a very good idea, and I think that having, setting up Zoom as, the villain who's sending various metahumans from his Earth to kind of capture or kill the Flash, I think that was a much better way of justifying, like, having villains for Flash to fight than the particle accelerator explosion from last season. I think that, having them coming from other Earths was a better explanation. So I like that they did that here. I think that worked much better. But moving on to Cisco is a metahuman. So we found out that last season that he was also affected by the particle accelerator explosion and became a metahuman, but we didn't really know what that exactly meant, what exactly were his powers, and that's very much, a thing that is explored throughout this season. It's like, what are exactly his powers, how do they work, and we find out he has these powers, he calls them vibes, where he has visions of things that are happening, or have already happened, or are going to happen, so past, present, future, and that allows him to find out information that he wouldn't normally be able to find out. See events that he's not actually there for. I think that's pretty cool. I still don't completely understand how his powers work exactly, but I think that's a very cool that's a very cool power to have, a very cool kind of, very cool for storytelling to have this character who can see different things. I mean, on the one hand, it does seem kind of like a very convenient thing to be like, oh, we need to figure out some information. Let's just have Cisco vibe. But I think it worked very well, and it just makes sense to have him do that, so I like that they have, they explore his powers in this season a lot. And now I want to talk about Barry and Patty. We get this new character on the show this season. Patty wants to be Joe's partner fighting metahumans, and eventually she ends up having a relationship with Barry. They end up dating, and I like them as a couple. I think they were a very cute couple. I mean, obviously, I you know I want Barry and Iris to be together, but I also really really like Barry and Patty being together. In some ways, you know in some ways, honestly, I wouldn't have been mad if they just kind of let them be together and just forgot about the Barry and Iris thing. They just let them, but I think that obviously I like Barry and Iris, so I like that they continued their relationship and they have Patty move away so they could just focus on Barry and Iris again. So, I'm kind of torn because, I really love Barry and Patty, but, obviously you kind of want to have Barry and Iris be together. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. Again, I'm torn with it, but, again, I really, really enjoyed Barry and Patty, and I was sad when she moved away. But speaking of Iris, we find out her mother is alive. Kind of seeing a pattern in the Arrowverse of dead characters not actually being dead. Joe lied to her saying her mother was dead her entire life. He'd been lying to her, whereas he just didn't want to tell her the truth that she was like a drug addict, and he told her to leave, and so he wanted to protect Iris's memory of her mother, so he lied and said that she was dead. Said all this fake stuff about her, that she was great. Then we also find out that Joe has a son. Another kind of pattern in the Arrowverse. We have Oliver finding out he has a son, and we have Joe finding out he has a son that he did not know about for years. So he has a son, Wally West, and I like that when they introduce Wally as a character on the show, they kind of dedicate an episode for him to get to know each of the family members. They have him have an episode where he gets to know Joe, and then an episode where he gets to know Iris, then an episode where he gets to know Barry, and I like that they did that. Down the line in the season, he ends up getting captured by Zoom, and Barry has to give up his speed, which we'll get to later in the video, but Barry gives up his speed to save Wally, and this ends up, giving Wally a whole new outlook on life. He got a second chance, now he wants to be a vigilante, which is interesting. I've seen Season 3, Episode 1, and I know that, he's Kid Flash in, the alternate universe that Barry created, and I know Barry goes back and undoes that, but, he was there when the particle accelerator went off to give Barry his powers back, so, I don't know. I feel like that's going to not just be the alternate timeline thing. It's going to actually be in the actual timeline. Wally is a metahuman, does have super speed, does become Kid Flash. So I'm hoping that happens at some point. I think that they're kind of setting that up, having him want to be a vigilante, so I'm hoping that they kind of go that route with it. But moving on to the whole alternate dimension stuff, we get Harrison Wells from Earth 2. And I thought that was cool to kind of bring him back in as, just to continue to see Harrison Wells. And we actually see, it's cool that we get to see actual Harrison Wells. Not Harrison Wells, who's actually Evard Thawne. Actually Harrison Wells, from another universe, but it's Harrison Wells. Again, I like that they did that. We get to see, the same, this actor continue to be on the show, because I like him as an actor. I haven't seen him in anything else, but I like him as an actor on the show, so I like that they kind of didn't let that die just, when Reverse Flash disappeared. They continue to have him on the show, so again, I like that they did that. I think that they did a good job having, showing his relationship with his daughter, both when she was captured, but also when they free her. I think that they did a good job of showing, how much he loves his daughter, that he will do anything to get her back, and then, when they do free her, we get to see the relationship with both of them together. So, again, I think they did a very good job with that, obviously, when they free her, they go to Earth 2, Barry, Cisco, and Wells go to Earth 2 to free his daughter. And I like those two episodes that took place on Earth 2. I think they did a good job of just showing, the different versions of everybody, the different, the doppelgangers, how different they are on Earth 2 than they are on Earth 1. We see Barry and Iris are married. Joe's a singer, Iris is a cop, Cisco, Caitlin, and Ronnie are all evil. I just think that they did a very good job showing the alternate versions of everybody, how just changing certain details in their life changed them completely. So I thought that was very interesting, and while the season deals a lot with the alternate dimensions and Earths and stuff, they still do a lot with time travel. They introduced the idea of time remnants, which I don't think I completely understand. I think it's cool that they had them, they had it come up a few times. They had Eobard Thawne, Reverse Flash, he was a time remnant, and we got to, I like that they absolutely have Wells from Earth 2, kind of continuing the Wells stuff, but they also continue Reverse Flash stuff, having, again, Reverse Flash as a time remnant, which I thought was good to, I like seeing more of Reverse Flash. Again, not having the Reverse Flash on the show, die when he disappears in season 1. Still continuing Reverse Flash appearing and still affecting characters, not just having it completely end when he disappears. Nope, no more Reverse Flash for the rest of the show. Nope, he's gone. No, they actually have him come back a few times. They figure out ways, whether it's time travel or alternate dimensions or stuff, they figure out ways to have the Reverse Flash appear again, which I like, and I like that they find ways to do, actual Eobard Thawne as Eobard Thawne, but they also find other ways to have Eobard Thawne as Wells, that version of Reverse Flash appear ×2 when they have Barry go back in time to have Wells teach him how to increase his speed to fight Zoom. I think that having him go back in time there was interesting. We also, when he goes back in time in that episode, we get introduced to time wraiths, which are basically these, demon creatures who are, go after people who mess with time. And so, I thought that was an interesting new concept with the time travel rules of the show, that there's creatures who are trying to keep, time the way it's supposed to be, try to, stop people from messing time. I like that they introduced that idea. And also, in the episode when Barry goes back in time to get information from Wells Thawne about increasing his speed, he also gets a video of Eddie talking about Iris telling her how he feels. That kind of allows Iris to move on from Eddie, allows her to get to the point where she's ready to be with Barry, which is a big part of the season, kind of after this. I'm back to time remnants. I'm sorry, I already talked about them a bit, but again, I'm just so confused by them because, they have, again, Eobard Thawne, he's a time remnant. They allow him to come back as a time remnant, but they also have, Zoom. He has a time remnant that, he has a few time remnants that he kills, which I don't understand how that works. So, yeah, time remnants are confusing, but speaking of Zoom, he's the villain of this season, and I think they did a very good job with him. They set up Jay Garrick is the Flash from Earth 2, and, they set him up as a very, good guy, trying to help Flash, but then they reveal Jay Garrick is actually Zoom, and Jay Garrick isn't even Jay Garrick. His real name is Hunter Zolomon, and he's a serial killer on Earth 2, so I think that they did a good job with that reveal. They reveal it and you're like, no, but then you're like, it makes sense too, and it's that they did a very good job with his reveal, and mostly explaining, all the, confusing things about it, why is he pretending to be the Flash, and he explains that he pretended to be Flash in order to give people hope so he could take it away as Zoom. So, yeah. And his whole thing is pretty much he wants to be the fastest speedster in the multiverse, and so he ends up creating this speed drug called Velocity 6, and that ends up, makes him a lot faster, but it ends up making him sick, and the only way he can be healed is he needs the Flash's speed, and so that's why he's going after Barry this season, is so he could take his speed and cure himself, and eventually he is able to do it, because like I mentioned before, he captures Wally, and Barry has to end up giving up his speed in order to save Wally, and I think that was a very interesting plotline here. The episodes where Flash doesn't have his speed, I like that they still show him trying to be a hero, but eventually he realizes that he can't really effectively be a hero fighting metahumans without super speed, and so Harrison Wells from Earth 2 devises a plan to turn on the particle accelerator and recreate the scenarios that gave Barry his speed the first time. And so, of course, there was kind of a bit of a debate about whether or not they should do it, whether it's safe, whether it could kill Barry, is the risk worth it? But eventually they decide they're gonna do it, and they turn on the particle accelerator, have all the right chemicals, have the lightning, and Barry dies. But not really. So Barry ends up in the Speed Force, and the Speed Force ends up taking the appearance of different people in his life, specifically Joe, Iris, his father, and his mother. I think that was an interesting thing of having him in the Speed Force, getting to the point where he can accept his mother's death, which is what they're saying is kind of holding him back from really being a hero, really doing everything that he can do, I guess. So he ends up accepting his mother's death, and they allow him to go back to Earth, and he has his powers back. And so now Barry, coming out of the Speed Force with his new powers, he has a lot of optimism now about defeating the metahumans, defeating Zoom, until Zoom takes his father and kills him. Zoom kills Barry's father, and this is right at the, pretty much right before this, his father had said he decided to finally stay in Central City, be a regular character on the show, but obviously, I guess because of the outside world stuff, they can't have this actor be a regular character on the show, so they have to kill him off. In all seriousness, I think that this moment, this death was really good. I think that it came at the right moment, having Barry finally accept his mother's death and have to immediately lose his father, who he had to live most of his life without because he was in jail, and so I think that was a very good moment. Not a good moment, but I think that was very well executed moment there, setting up, what happens in the last few moments of this season, which I'll get to in a second. But that brings us to the finale, where Zoom wants to race Barry to see who's the fastest speedster in the multiverse, but of course that's not really his real plan. His real plan is he wants to use their speed to turn on this machine that will pretty much destroy every single other Earth in the multiverse except for their Earth. Earth 1, the one they're on currently. And so at first Barry's like, okay, I'm gonna do it, but everybody else is like, yeah, that's kind of a big risk. What if you can't beat him? Then the whole multiverse is gonna be destroyed. But he's not listening to them, so they end up putting him into one of the cells in the, underneath the lab that they put all the metahumans in. And they try to defeat Zoom by themselves without Barry. They fail, Joe gets captured, so they decide that they have to let Barry out, let him race Zoom in order to get Joe back. So we get to the race, and, they're going around the whole thing, and then we see 2 Barrys there. Barry ended up creating a time remnant to help him fight Zoom, to have, the time remnant still running to try to stop the machine while Barry fights Zoom, and his time remnant ends up having to sacrifice himself, and then time wraiths end up coming and attacking and killing Zoom. And I think it's cool that they used, the two things that they introduced this season as the way they beat Zoom. They have time remnants and they have time wraiths. Still, again, I don't understand time remnants that much, but whatever. And then we find out who's the guy in the helmet. So throughout the season, anytime they've went to Zoom's lair, they see this guy who's been captured, and he has a helmet on, and so you can't see who it is. And we finally, they get him from where he was being captured on Earth 2. They get him, they take off the helmet, and it's the real Jay Garrick. And not only is it the real Jay Garrick, but he looks like Barry's father. He's Barry's father's doppelganger from Earth 3. And in Zoom's, traveling through the multiverse, he ended up finding Jay Garrick, Flash, from Earth 3, and that's where he got the idea to be the Flash, to be Jay Garrick, and he captured the real Jay Garrick, put him in the helmet, and I think that was a cool reveal here. They even kind of set it up earlier, having his father tell him that his mother's maiden name was Garrick. So I think that was a really good reveal there, especially because they just had Barry's father die, and so this makes Barry start to miss his father even more, but I'll get to that in a second. But then Harrison Wells and his daughter from Earth 2 and Jay Garrick from Earth 3 go back through the breach to their own Earths, and then we move on to the final moments, the final few minutes of the episode. Barry and Iris, they talk about maybe getting together, and Barry tells her that he's broken. He lost, he's just getting to the point where he accepted his mother's death, and then his father dies, and he's going to need a little bit of time before he can get to where he needs to be to finally, be with Iris. And so Iris tells him that she'll wait for him, whatever he has to do. She'll be there, she'll wait for him to be ready. And then she goes back inside. Barry looks at the window, says, "I'm sorry." He runs off, runs through a portal, back in time to the night his mother died, pushes Reverse Flash out of the way as he's about to kill his mother, pushes him out of the way, and saves his mother. That was a great moment. I think that is one of the best endings of any TV show season I've ever seen. It's just this moment that just comes out of nowhere, but makes sense at the same time of why he does it, and it's amazing. And I've seen season 3, episode 1, and I love the route they went with it, the way, how they showed the actual consequences of doing that, the different, how different the world is, 15 years later, having his mother not die, having him not go live with Joe and Iris, and I guess, is that how the original timeline happened, I guess? Because the Reverse Flash goes back and kills his mother, which didn't happen in the original timeline. And so, now that he goes back and saves his mother, does that mean that he just fixed the timeline? But he technically didn't, because that's not his timeline, so it's interesting. I like that they did that. I think that's the moment that's just like, what? Crazy! So, yeah, I think they did a very good job with having that be the way that this season ends, and I think that this was a much better cliffhanger than when he goes up into the singularity. I think that this worked a lot better, and already, again, seeing season 3, episode 1, the kind of payoff of it is a lot better than the payoff of the singularity. I guess the singularity, the payoff of that is having, opening up the breaches and stuff, but I don't know, I feel like they didn't do enough with the singularity to where I felt like it was the right payoff for the cliffhanger, whereas I feel like what they're doing with with season 3, with the payoff of Barry saving his mother, is much better. And so, yeah, I think they just did a phenomenal job with this season, with the last few minutes of it, especially. And I'm very excited to see where it goes moving forward. And I know that it's only going to get crazier and cooler. And again, I'm excited. But anyway, please comment below your thoughts on Flash Season 2 and the crossover. And please remember to give this video a like, consider subscribing to this channel, and maybe check out some of my other videos. And with that said, that's a wrap.